Now let's take a look at the steps that constitute a typical mediation. Keep in mind that given the specific parties, the number of parties, the mediator who's chosen in his or her style, and possibly any rules or requirements of a contract or a court, these steps may vary. But what's outlined here is the general expectation for mediation. First, a mediator will usually reach out to the parties once the appointment process is completed, and that contact can be in person, or sending out an email to set up the logistics of this preliminary meeting. Sometimes mediators will do it in a joint session with everyone, and sometimes they'll just make individual phone calls to the parties. The latter is usually done where there's familiarity among the parties. Also keep in mind that these preliminary matters, if the parties are represented by counsel, it's usually just the mediator and counsel who resolve this initial checklist. One of the first things they may talk about are pre-hearing statements. And there are many different kinds of pre-hearing statements. The statements can be directed just to the mediator and not exchanged between the parties. In some cases, they might just be exchanged between the parties and not given to the mediator. But most often what happens is they're documents summarizing the positions, outlining what the parties each party hopes to achieve in the mediation, and they are exchanged between the parties and sent to the mediator. How the parties come up with that, what's going to be required in the documents could be determined jointly, or it could be directed by the mediator exclusively, or sometimes I have seen mediators ask the parties, you put whatever you want in there. What is important for me, the mediator, to know to try to help you resolve this? And so you could get two very different statements from the parties. And again, if they are going to be exchanged between the parties, that might add a helpful layer if parties include information the other hadn't considered. But most typically, again, these are documents that are exchanged to set the stage, make sure everyone knows what the issues are, and what the parties hope to get out of the process. When they are addressed to the mediator, many mediators subscribe to the theory that you should still be writing them, really more focused on the other side, because this is not a case where someone is going to be deciding the case, so you aren't trying to impress the judge. What you're trying to do is set the stage for effective discussions. And a final point on pre-hearing statements, if a mediator asks that they be sent to the mediator directly without exchange to the party, they might also be opening the door to let the parties talk about things like party dynamics and the relationship that led up to this dispute, some insights that wouldn't be helpful necessarily to share with the other side, but would be helpful for the mediator to formulate his or her strategy on how to deal with the parties, knowing how contentious this is, how emotional the other side is, or what the perception of that emotion is. The other preliminary matters that are going to be covered at this stage are obviously the logistics. Where is it going to be held? How long is it going? How long are the sessions going to be scheduled? The mediator is going to take this opportunity to confirm that all the necessary parties are there and that those necessary parties have the authority to settle. Mediators really don't want to get into a situation where someone says, oh, I'll have the adjuster on the phone, or we'll have to take this back to a board. If it's a municipal situation or some other governmental situation, that may not be able to be avoided, but you should have a strong level of authority decision-making present in the mediation, and the mediator is going to reiterate that point at several points, but especially here at the preliminary meeting. They'll talk about any rules or guidelines that cover. They'll go over scheduling, if there are any cancellation or postponement issues in terms of communication or policies or how that affects compensation. They also going to talk about setting the mediation agenda. Who goes first? What to expect? Is the mediator going to open with joint sessions or caucuses? And any sort of other preparation they should do before they actually get into the mediation room. And there also may be some discussion of additional pre-session contact. If they didn't do that drilling down of what are the party dynamics in the statements, what mediators often will do is say, after this meeting, but before we actually get together in a room, I'm going to reach out to each of you and just give you the opportunity to tell me anything else you want to about this case. So those are some of the typical pre-hearing issues that are addressed among the parties or through the counsel of the parties and the mediator that help prepare for a successful or at least productive mediation session. The mediation session itself almost always starts with what's called a mediator's opening or a mediator's opening statement. This is very important. It covers some of the obvious things like a welcome and introductions. It's good to just get everyone off on a comfortable tone. And given what's gone on in the preliminary stage, the mediator uses this opportunity to establish whether it's going to be a very formal and structured process or a very informal process. The mediator will reiterate that this is voluntary, again, going over the principles of self-determination, that while a mediator may get very involved in the settlement process, at the end of the day, it has to be the parties independently agreeing to whatever agreements are made during the process. The mediator will review the duties and obligations pertaining to confidentiality and will go over that he or she is going to be asking for permission in the individual sessions before any information is relayed to the other side. The mediator will review his or her role, that they are not counsel to any one party, and while they may give evaluations, that is not the same as giving legal or other professional advice. The mediator is also going to remind the participants of their role, that they have entered into this presumably with the good faith intent to settle, and they should conduct themselves in that manner. And again, the mediator will confirm that there is authority to settle present in the room. Contained in the videos for this week's class, there is an excellent example of an opening statement given by Chuck Doran, and please make sure that you review that. In most mediations, once the opening statement has been completed, there's what's called the joint session, and at this time all of the participants and their counsel are still in the room, and it gives the parties an opportunity to really tell the story. Why are we here? We being everyone, and then specifically why are the individuals there, and giving some history on how they got there. Who makes the opening statement, the parties or the attorneys? In most business disputes, it usually is the attorney. The attorney is well versed in litigation and arbitration presentation techniques, and often mediation presentation techniques. They usually have more experience framing the issues in a way that presents their client's interests in the most favorable manner, but in a way that will be helpful to the other side. They can manage emotions. When a party tells the story, sometimes they get caught up in it and can step out of bounds of the initial tone of trying to get the case to settle. Also, attorneys are bound by a professional code of ethics and cannot lie or mislead. And again, their mediation experience comes into play. They can assess the case. They've already done that analysis, so they are in a good position to make the opening statement. However, the party's own role in the opening statement is very important. They've lived with this case. There are two concepts that are important. Some people approach mediation as the chance to get their proverbial day in court and to tell their story. And just doing that may settle some of the concerns they have about resolving this case. Once they get everything off their chest, then they may be in a better mindset to look at some alternatives that perhaps didn't seem as useful to solving the case as it did when it was just the two parties trying to resolve it. And because they've lived with that issue, they might be a little more persuasive in their opening. Some mediators use various trust building and communication exercises to use this initial joint session to set a very productive stage. I can think of a mediator, and the story is referenced briefly in the textbook readings this week. This mediator had a probably 10 or 15 party case that involved the rebuilding of a research ship, and all the participants were assembled in a large room. The mediator took a chance and asked the attorneys to go sit in the back of the room, and had all the players sitting in the front of the room, and asked them to create a timeline of what happened from a time when they just got to know each other, were creating this joint venture, and everyone was still getting along. And through that process, it had to be interactive, and different parties throwing out different information for the mediator to put on the board at different times, and it created a positive mindset and help the parties be a little more open to listening to each other, because they remembered that they weren't always at odds with each other. So that might be a very productive way to get the process going. After the joint session, the mediator usually meets individually with one party This is called a caucus. And here's where they really start getting into the meat of the dispute, finding out what the interests are, what the positions are. While a mediator is meeting with one side, particularly in a case where those caucuses might take a bit of time to get through all the information, some mediators will assign the waiting party a task or an assignment. So they keep focused on what the purpose of the mediation is, and they don't get disillusioned by how long it's taking and are more inclined to walk early. It doesn't always happen in the first caucus, but it is something you may want to expect in a mediation. And keep in mind that after a mediator has heard a party in caucus and the party and the mediator have come up with an initial offer or a later offer, depending upon where they are, the mediator should be asking the party if the mediator has permission to share this, and the mediator should state exactly what they're going to share so that the party making this offer has confidence of what the other side is going to hear, and it's what that party truly intends to offer. This process can go back and forth between caucuses and joint sessions for as long as it takes, but at some point, if substantial progress hasn't been made, mediators have to resort to different techniques to break the impasse between the parties. There's no one magic answer. Below is a list of things that mediators might do, such as finding small wins. If the parties have been able to agree on a few things, you can use those to build momentum and remind the parties that they are making progress. Might be seeking additional information or sharing similar stories. It could be acknowledging concessions and saying, okay, the other side made a big concession in our first issue here. So is there something you can do that will show the other side that you're willing to bend a little bit too? That can be a very effective strategy. Taking a time out is always a process that might be helpful, whether it's an hour just to calm people down, or maybe it's a full day or a couple weeks. It depends upon what is actually happening in the mediation. Reviewing the next step in the process, usually arbitration or litigation, can be a reminder to the parties that if we can't get this together and work something out, we're going to go into a much more formal process where we lose control over what the answer is. There's a final process, or maybe it's not final, but it's another way that mediators can look at breaking the impasse, and that's called the mediator's proposal. The mediator, having listened to the parties throughout the course of what's gone on during the session, will come up with a proposal using input from both sides. And the mediator will propose to both parties that he is going to make a proposal, but give each of them the opportunity to respond in a private caucus. So they don't have to say no if that's their answer, or don't have to say yes in front of the other side. There's always that trepidation if I say one answer, that may make the other side move in the opposite direction. But the goal here, again, is to break the impasse. So the mediator will take into account everything that's happened so far, try to come up with a good proposal, give it to both parties, and let them privately tell him or her what their answer is. Obviously, if the parties agree, they've reached a settlement. If one party declines, talks resume. The key points are that the mediator asks permission to do this and reminds the parties that even though it's the mediator's proposal, that it is the party's decision. So the mediator's proposal is one way to break the impasse. If the parties are successful in reaching a settlement, below is a general checklist of things that should be in the settlement agreement. And like negotiation, some form of written agreement should be written up and signed before the parties leave. Parties have to go back and either get more authority to sign off, or people start crossing I's and dotting T's. That can lessen the likelihood that what settlement was reached in the mediation actually holds up. But these are pretty basic. The parties, what are the issues? What were the problems they were trying to solve? What were the resolutions to those problems? And allocation of the costs, specifically the attorney's fees, administrative fees, and mediators' fees, the governing law, confidentiality, and signatures. If the parties reach an impasse, they need to possibly report it to the court if this was court-ordered, figure out if the mediator may have any role in helping them design their next step, and reviewing the contractual terms of what is going forward. And note that that mediator being involved in process design is not an ethical violation. The mediator would only be serving to help them craft the next step, not stepping into the role of arbitrator or mediator. So that is the general process.